Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? Is Jason Harris here with my man, Kyle.
Yeah.
Welcome to a very special edition of The Drive. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, so for everyone out there listening, watching right now, Kyle, who don't know who you are and how you kind of got started in the industry, you know I love kicking off these podcasts with a little origin story. So what is the origin story of Kyle getting started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
Yeah, you know, I always start this like a little bit different, right? Because once you get on like 10 podcasts, you've done your origin story 10 times, right?
Of course.
So I think like one of the interesting things about my origin story is back when I was probably in middle school. So my dad was a pastor, right?
Yeah.
So which makes great, like every pastor's kid wants to become a car salesperson when they're growing up, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So I actually had someone, when I was in middle school, stop me and said, hey, you, like just your personality, the way you communicate, you should think about selling cars one day. I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my whole life, right? Here we are, just a few years later, right? So reality is my wife and I, well, not wife at the time, she had gotten a job in Pensacola as a professional ballerina, which that's a whole story in itself,
okay,
right?
That's cool.
So I had to get down there because we weren't going to live together, and Pensacola is not particularly known for music or church starts, which is kind of what I went to school for, right? And so there was this tinge in my ear of that person in middle school that was like, you might be good at selling something, mainly cars. So I went to an interview. I fogged a mirror real quick. It was really a fancy interview. And they said, you're hired. Can you start tomorrow? I had to move all of my stuff, so I started a couple weeks later. And that was a Kia dealership. Now you know where I started, because if you Google Kia and Pensacola, there's only one. And that was an interesting experience. Moved on from that. So I was selling cars, sold cars there. Then worked at a Nissan store there in Pensacola for about a year and a half. And then about a year after that was kind of quickly into management and running stores. And I've, kind of run the gamut for across the variable ops side, operationally, even I've learned service, trained service. And so
you got your background and everything.
Yeah, I just kind of like...
You touch everything.
I've touched everything. The only thing I have not done, and you'll never want me to do, is turn a wrench.
I'm the same way. I got nothing but mad respect for anybody that can turn a set of wrenches, because
absolutely,
what those set of wrenches are worth in my hands is nowhere close to what it's worth in someone else's hands.
Dude, I would mess it up every time. I mean, I can do simple home, like housework and stuff, but you do not want me underneath a car. That is for sure. Actually, the techs where I used to work always made fun of me because like I couldn't even get it right, like to lift the car, right? Like we'd set it. I'd be back there, we've got to look at a used car, and they're on the other side of the lift. They're like, all right, lift it up. I'm like, yo, that's gonna happen. We're gonna have to switch around.
So you've had an opportunity to kind of taste a lot of different aspects of marketing and operations.
Yeah.
For anybody that's getting into the business for the first time, all right, that hasn't had a chance to taste everything like you have, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think what's interesting is a lot of people, they just, when they see the car business, they see salespeople, right?
Yep.
Or service advisors. And while that is a really, really strong entry point into the industry is recognizing, and even just internally, that there's a lot more entry points that we can plug people into. So
for sure,
whether you went to school for accounting or for marketing or for, customer service or HR, there's a place for you in retail automotive, let alone like the vendor side of things, right? Which is a whole nother side of automotive that I was actually, interestingly enough, I was telling someone, we're out here at Driving Sales Digital Dealer, right? I was telling someone what I'm doing, where I'm going. And they said, oh, so like it's a conference for like what? Like the people that, build like the seats and the stuff for the cars. And I was like, oh no, there's a whole vendor side of like the tech that dealers use.
Yeah.
And they just didn't have a frame of reference for it. So if you haven't been in the industry, there's this whole technology landscape that dealers have to execute with in order to do that on a ground level that like the manufacturers like a Ford or a Mazda or a Toyota, don't even dip their hands into.
So would you advise someone getting into the business that that's where they should look at first?
Either way, right?
Yeah.
Especially,
That's hilarious because I know you're going from the dealer world over to the vendor world, which I did
Yeah.
the same thing, right? I was a dealer principal, and then I left that to join the dark side. And, I became part of the dark side. No, I'm just kidding. But that's interesting because most people you talk to in the automotive industry, they don't tell you, well, go check out the vendor side of it, right?
Yeah, I think either way, right? I think
But it's fun being a vendor because you get to be a partner.
Well,
right?
and what's really
with
cool
a lot
is
of people.
With dealers, like you kind of get locked into like your dealer, your location,
Your brand.
area,
Yeah, 100%.
your brand. And what I've learned even before I moved to the vendor side, which was just a couple months ago, is that as you start to tap into that, you start to lay across, a greater swath of the industry, get to know people, the networking. I mean, it's actually a really cool industry once you get to just that networking level and getting to engage with people outside of just your location, your store. So
yeah, no, look, I gotta be honest with you. It's something that I was surprised by when I got into the vendor side was, I had a Mitsubishi dealership. So my whole life was Mitsubishi, used cars, that was it, right? And, getting over to the vendor side, I get to just deal with so many different, size of operations, different brands, different issues. And it's actually, it's a fun challenge.
Right.
It really is. So you know what? I don't disagree with you. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing to think about when you first get in the business.
So last night, I'm on the plane, right? And my life for the last 8.5 years has been Mazda, right? So I know Mazda co-op guidelines. Like the back, right? I probably actually know them better than the OEM because I actually am the one that has to execute on them.
Of course.
Like I can tell Sierra and Shift more about the co-op guidelines than they can, right? And so, but last night I'm literally organizing a drive folder of like 17 different co-op programs so that I can always pull them up based on who I'm working with. And so it's really cool to see how different manufacturers handle that, different stores handle, how they execute, these marketing strategies. And so you really get this, if you are on the vendor side or come into that side, you get a really good overview of the industry. Yeah, however, I will say this. I know that those that started on the vendor side and have never left have a unique disadvantage because of their inability to know what it looks like
to understand the operations
day-to-day operations.
No, I'm with you. I think that's definitely been a big part of my success is understanding, what it takes to stay 2.5 hours after closing to close a deal, to find out that they can't even finance a hot dog if they wanted to.
Right.
So to go through the chaos and the pain that is dealer operations, I think it's really important as a vendor. I think it brings a lot of insight. So actually, that's a good segue into my next question then for you. So then, how do we make the vendor and dealer relationship, let's say, stronger or more like a partnership rather than a client-customer
Well,
relationship?
one, I would say if you're on the vendor side, and this is something that I'm keenly aware of. Actually, I've already talked to a few dealers that are willing to do this for me even, is I know that even being, moving from the sales engine to the marketing engine within the dealership, I need to just keep my skills sharp on knowing what it feels like to be on the showroom floor in the service drive. So I'd go write service, or I'd go, work the desk for, half a day or something like that. And so if you're on the vendor side, find a dealer partner that you really have a good relationship with and create the inroads to spend a day doing the work with them, right? To where you can not just learn, but if you have been on the dealer side, stay sharp, right? Know what it feels like still to be in that world. I think that will go a long way for not just that dealer, but all the dealers that you work with.
Well, 100%. You want to put yourself into your client's shoes, and the better you can understand what they're dealing with on a regular basis, you can empathize them with.
It's the same way that I encourage salespeople to, at minimum annually, go shop for a car.
Oh yeah, or I even encourage salespeople to spend time in the service department next to the service advisor, just so they know what the advisor has to go through on a regular basis. I mean, how many times do you hear the sales department, complain about the parts department or the service department, and it's like, man, just you haven't been in their shoes. Go spend some time with them.
Yep.
You'll find out that they're dealing with a lot.
Yep. And then from the dealer perspective,
Mm-hmm.
What we want, like what all dealers want, is they always say, I want partners, I want partners, I want partners. Yet what they do is they show up to meetings late, right?
Okay.
Cancel.
Man, we can do a whole podcast just
Cancel
on this
all the
topic.
virtual sessions, right?
Yeah.
When they are on the virtual session, they're checking emails because they've got 2 screens up, right?
Yeah.
And so, and to be clear, like I have not experienced this yet, but I just know what it was like being on the dealer side, even like getting everyone in the room. So this is really cool. I know a few dealerships now that are actually bringing all of their vendor partners that are key players into the room at the same time.
Yeah,
Quarterly.
I have a few clients that do that on a regular basis.
Genius.
And I think it's amazing. I get invited on a lot of these OEM calls.
Yeah.
Which it's a bit of a hack, to be honest with you. And I think any dealer out there that's got a good vendor partner, you should consider doing this.
Yeah.
Because I hear information and I'm able to consume information and I'm able to put marketing campaigns in play faster than me waiting around for an email that they may or may not remember to actually send to me in the first place.
Without a doubt. And now if you've got, your third-party marketplace, your traditional, your digital, your all of those people in the room with your executive team planning, you actually are strategizing at a much deeper level than you ever could with like a vendor, because then every vendor has to ask the same questions. How many cars have you sold this month?
Yeah.
How many are you planning next month? What's the inventory like? And you just feel like you're repeating yourself. But if you can get them all in the same room sometimes, like the speed and efficiency that you can get
I think the best part about being in the same room, and any dealers out there that's watching or listening to this right now, is I don't find dealers share enough about their operational goals and objectives with their vendors. So I mean, that was
why?
That was an exercise I did when I was a dealer, and I didn't know that most people didn't do this. To be honest with you, I actually thought this was normal practice.
Yep.
I would go to my website provider, I'd go to my marketing company, I'd go to my BDC, I'd go to all of my vendors and say, hey, look, this month I need to increase our CP, hours per RO by 0.3. That's what I'm looking for. That's my goal. All right. I'm looking to increase test drives on our Lancers by at least 27%. Right. And these are the kind of operational goals
the
I put into
finite
place.
details.
Yeah,
right?
really finite details. And then I just simply say, here's the goal. Now, when we meet, okay, now this is the other thing I find is important when you have meetings, is that you have this information in advance, right?
Yes.
When we meet, that's what I want to discuss.
And wait,
on how
you
you're
were
going to help me
leading
do
the
it.
meeting.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You were saying this is the expectation that I have.
So then they would
for
come
you
to me
bring
with
the
ideas,
table.
and I loved it, and it was so
Genius.
productive. And I'll tell you, it wasn't a 3-hour meeting.
No.
A lot of times they were 30 minutes, and they would come back to me and say, hey, Jay, website provider, come back to me and say, hey, Jay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change this. We're going to move some homepage banners around. We're going to put up some additional splash pages and landing pages around that. And we're going to build out a page giving details on what's the value proposition to take a test drive on the Lancer. And I'm like, okay, go do that.
Yeah.
So I let them take ownership of my operational goals and objectives. And I gotta be honest with you, we crushed it that way. My life was so much easier. Any dealers, you guys got to do this.
Yeah, that's and not just that, but they were probably freed up to get innovative.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Instead of going,
the expectation
the
was
last
to be
dealer over
innovative.
here, we just kind of cookie cutter this, so let's put it in yours and see if it works.
Oh God, I can't stand that. But actually, I mean, I tell a lot of dealers out there, if you are shopping for a vendor of any kind, if they don't ask you about your operational goals, then they're probably not the vendor for you.
Right.
Oh, there's the Elvis wedding chapel. See, I do squirrel sometimes.
There it is.
There it is. We want to get married.
Look at that.
Man, this
That's
is not
fun.
as pretty as it drives as usual. There's like construction
There's
everywhere.
construction everywhere
There's
out here.
Like normally, this
orange
is
cones like crazy.
oh yeah, this is gonna be a great video. Let's just stare at orange cones the entire time while Jason and Kyle drive up and down the strip.
At least you got the City of Las Vegas sign.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. We're going right under it. That'll be the fadeaway scene right there.
Yes. It's fabulous. It's fabulous.
So I like this topic. I like what we're jamming about right now.
Yeah.
I like creating better partnerships. But let's talk. I want to get your thoughts on this because you spent a lot of time in the dealership. All right. What are your thoughts on creating better partnerships within the departments?
Yeah. So, and I think that actually even still breaks down, right? Is because when you talk about departments having to have partnerships, there's still a level of segmentation there. Right?
100%, man.
And what I find really interesting is, and I don't care what company it is that we do start to segment the departments. And what happens, and this is the one that I hate, right? Oh, service. They can never get the cars through on time. Oh, sales. They're always bringing the cars in when we have 5 cars in the lane, right?
Oh, parts. Oh, they want to charge me over retail on everything.
All parts wants to do is blah, and accounting. They're just always coming back with issues on my deals, right? And the best organizations and the best companies understand that departments have efficiencies within themselves that need to operate, slightly segmented from the rest of the store in order to keep everybody accountable. But the best companies understand the dynamic of everybody being on the same playing field and working together toward a common goal. So this is the way I look at it, and I look at this in sales, in any engagement, right? Is that the majority of the time what we do, and I'll use my hands to kind of describe it, is we put the problem as the person across the table, right?
For sure.
And so whether that be a department or a client or anything like that, it's like the problem to solve is how to get that person or that department in line with me.
Yes.
Instead, if what we did is instead of facing this way and we both faced the other way, right? Mm-hmm. And allowed the problem to be in front of both of us, then all of a sudden we're both after the same problem together moving forward.
But see, that requires ownership.
Right.
And I think to get the departments to take ownership of, kind of each other, it has to come from the top down. And I got to be honest with you, and this is not a great part of our industry, but I've been in a lot of manager meetings. And I hate to say it, but there are a lot of dealer principals out there that will pin each department against each other.
They will. Yep.
Like, look what this one's doing, and look at the gross profit that they brought in, and why can't you, so it's like, I don't know where that actually came from, to be honest with you. I don't know how that started, like pinning departments together. But what advice can you give to managers that are in that type of situation where they feel like the ownership is pinning each department's against each other?
All right. So first, buy the book Traction, okay? And just leave it in random places around the dealership and hope that your boss, the dealer principal, picks it up, right? Because it's really, the level 10 meeting, especially the managers meeting, there's a lot of great things within the meeting, but what I really love about it is you bring these what they call IDSs in: identify, discuss, and solve. And the idea is that we're going to identify an issue, and then we actually all have to discuss it together. And so what happens is now the sales team is helping the service team solve an issue, and what happens is what they realize is that they actually have an operational efficiency in their department that's harming the other department.
Yeah.
Their ability to thrive and survive. And so if any leader wants to really create that efficiency, you can really simply do it with attacking with giving that to the leadership. And so if you're a dealer principal on the line and you haven't read that, or if you haven't watched 20 hours of Simon Sinek
actually,
videos.
Another one is that I just got into is predictive success.
Oh, okay.
You got to check that one out.
I will.
Again, it's kind of the same thing as this person spent 20 years and he's a mathematician trying to predict success within companies, thinking that there was a formula and a series of numbers to do it, and over the 20 years he realizes that's not the case.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the people and the way that we organize those people that can actually create a formula around predictive success.
Yeah. But so, and then if you're in what I would call middle level management within a dealership, and you feel this, like what you were saying, that the ownership, the leadership isn't operating in that way, do this. Go to another department, identify an issue in your department, not in their department. Identify an issue in your department and ask them to help you solve it.
Ask for advice. And
bring that solution to the leadership together. And when they see you working in that way,
it's contagious.
Did
I just use that word?
You did a thing
Did I do that? Did I just drop that?
Did you do that?
Did I just do a mic drop?
Did he say contagious? Man, why didn't you get that car? There's a slingshot we just drove by that's orange.
Can you imagine recording audio in that?
No,
belted in the face.
We'd be done.
This is actually not too bad.
Right.
All right. Except I didn't realize how much music is being played on the strip
everywhere
as we're driving around.
Okay, wait. We interrupt this podcast to bring you this question, which is a burning question in our industry, speaking of orange.
Yes.
It's a burning question in our industry. We're flipping the tides. I'm throwing it at you.
Oh, no.
You can choose which way to answer the question. It's who started first or who wore it better, Jason Harris or Sean V. Bradley with the orange color?
Oh, it's me. Absolutely. I mean, there's
you for both answers?
No. He started wearing it long before. Funny thing is, I didn't even know. So there was something I got taught by a successful manager years and years ago. And he taught me the whole methodology behind horse blinders. And if you're into horse racing, you'll notice that they wear these kind of like things on the side of their eyes. And the reason for that is they can't see the horses to the left or to the right of them. So it creates a blinder. So it always makes them focus on what's ahead.
Yeah.
And that theory can be easily used in business as well. I started wearing an orange tie literally by accident. Have I told you the story about it?
No. Okay. That's why I'm asking this question.
Okay, so I was going to a conference. So I sold my dealership, started the agency, going to a conference. I'm literally within a week of probably selling the dealership. Didn't even have a business card yet, by the way.
Yeah.
And we didn't even have a name for the company. So you can see how the name for the company was really artistic. Digital Dealership Solutions. Yeah, that took a long time to think about. In fact, actually, it was a graphic designer that came up with the name for it. They're like, DDS. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Didn't realize later there are like 17 DDSs, by the way, in our industry. But I got to the conference, was going to head down to the conference, realized I didn't have a tie. So I'm like, crap. So I know the hotel I was staying at had a fancy, men's clothing store downstairs. So I'm going, oh God, I'm gonna have to go down there and buy a $300 tie or something. I'm gonna be so angry because I have to do this, right? So I go down there and I'm looking and they have a clearance section. I'm like, all right, $150 for a tie.
Goodness.
And from the side of my eye, I noticed this orange. And I'm like, wait a second, that looks like the logo they made. I pull out the business card they made for me. It's this black business card with an orange logo on it. I said, you know what? I'm gonna buy a tie that I'm never gonna wear again. All right, I might as well buy an orange tie. All right, so I bought the orange tie, went through the conference, made a lot of good connections, networked my way through the whole crowd and everything. And then afterwards, I started calling up on people and connecting with people. And they're like, Jason who? Jason what? What do you do again? You remember the guy with the orange tie? Oh, I remember talking to you. And that's when I had this light bulb moment when I got back from this conference, color association. And then, of course, I read a book on color association after that.
Of course.
And I was like, okay, this makes sense. And everything, all of our sales sheets, our websites, all of our logos moving forward, all became orange. I bought 17 orange ties off of Amazon. By the way, no $150 ties.
Wow.
$19.99.
And you were off.
I was off. And, some people would struggle to remember, my name or something like that, but they would remember the guy wearing an orange tie.
The guy with the orange tie.
The guy with the orange tie. Wow. It was only until probably maybe 9 months later did somebody ask me about this Bradley guy. They're like, do you work for him?
No way.
I was like, who's this person? And I had to look it up. And that was just me just having my blinders on and just not knowing anything else in the industry or anybody else around me. But it was a fun origin story, but I also think it's a good lesson to learn. Is that you just don't pay attention to everybody else around you. I mean,
it's interesting. So similar story, right? So my new thing is Contagious. Contagious Auto. Paul Daly and myself have started this, and by the
way, you couldn't have picked a better partner.
Dude, it's been, you wouldn't even believe some of the stuff that comes out of our brains on calls, and we just, it's going to be really fun. And just the stuff that we're going to be able to do and how we want to impact the industry. So it's just like the partnership has been really fun already. But so I created this name. This was in the middle of the pandemic, by the way, 3 months into the pandemic. And I'm sitting down, I'm trying to write all these different ideas for a podcast, because that was the first idea, right?
Yep.
And I'm writing all these names. I'm like, I want to start a podcast. I just want to talk about things that I'm seeing in the industry, right? So I'm writing out all these names. And I get Contagious out. I'm like, man, that sounds good. something that's contagious, something that's, engaging and all that.
Yeah.
So the first person I tell goes, don't you think it's bad timing?
Right?
And I was like, golly, right? And then I thought, you know what? Maybe not, because maybe actually people understand that this whole, like what's contagious actually goes a lot quicker if it's contagious,
I think the meaning of contagious is actually probably better known now than it ever has been in the past. So it's not a bad thing.
Exactly. So it's not a bad thing. So then I go to call the podcast Contagious Conversations. The CDC has a podcast called Contagious Conversations. So I started by calling it Contagious Podcast. We've since rebranded it Contagious Conversations because that's what I really want it to be. And the CDC's podcast is blah, right? So, but the whole point of the story is I'm on Clubhouse and I'm talking about the brand. This is like March of 2021 now. And Contagious, how'd you come up with it? This is how it happened. And John Acosta says to me, oh man, you must have read the book by Jonah Berger called Contagious. I'm like, no, I've never read that book. He's like, you're saying all of the things that he says in his book about marketing and branding. I'm like, no, I've literally never heard of the book. So I'm on Clubhouse on Amazon,
like while you're
ordering the book. 4 days later,
order paper books? Hold on.
I do.
You're one of those weird people.
I have to read the book.
Gosh.
I have to read the book because this is what happens when I'm listening to a book or reading a book here.
You order the paper, the actual physical in-hand paper.
So I have a very. We're gonna get to the end of the story. I promise, right?
Sorry.
Well, no. The end of the story is I read the book and like the first chapter, and I'm like, this guy and I are singing off the same song sheet. So I named the company well, right?
There you go.
But. So on the book thing, right? I have a little bit of a what's it called? A visual memory. I just lost the word, right? So I can remember where things are in a book based off the way the paragraphs feel and read.
Yeah, okay.
And so I don't really underline or write notes in books. I have that what's the dang word for the memory? Oh well, whatever.
We'll plug it in later.
Where you can like remember things by sight, right? But so I can go back to a book, and if I'm like, man, I really want to remember that quote or that paragraph, I can actually thumb through it really quickly and pull right to it. Mm-hmm. Basically any book that I've ever read. So I have to read the paper book so that I can go back and remember things.
There you go. Makes sense.
There's something about it that the only way I actually pay attention is if I'm holding it.
Right? Okay.
So yeah, I still order paper books and they stack up in my house, and then I read them. And
well, I
Contagious,
think it's gonna be
Contagious is one of those incredible books that everybody should read for sure.
Well, I'm gonna listen to the audio on the way.
You should. There you go. It's a great book. Jonah Berger, shout out.
So let's dive a little more into this Contagious, because I think there's just it starts right. It starts somewhere within a dealership. It's an idea, and I gotta be honest, I'm not a big fan of ideas, unless they're deeply rooted into a goal and objective, right? So because how many times have you walked into a meeting, I know I've had, where, let me tell you about my good idea, and I'm like, oh God, here it comes. But a good idea just kind of sits there, but it only becomes put into action when there's an actual goal put behind it, right? So how do we take a good idea and make it contagious, within our operational efforts?
Yeah, so let me just clear the air on this, right? I think that there's 3 layers of thought, right?
Okay.
One is what I would call thoughtfulness, and I actually got this idea from a guy named Darren Doan, is that thoughtfulness is actually extremely valuable to your long-term success.
Yeah.
And actually what we're doing right now is thoughtfulness. It's really like ideating on the theory of what's next, right? Thoughtfulness, actually what happens as thoughtfulness ruminates, it creates ideas. But like you said, unless ideas are on that 3rd level, which is execution, then the thoughtfulness actually isn't meaningful. And the problem is what most people do is they idolize ideas.
Yes.
And actually what has to happen is
they like to keep it in idea land.
Yep. You actually have to actually pull back on ideas and move from thoughtfulness to execution much quicker.
Yes.
Right?
That's where I find that is where I think our industry struggles the most. Or not, I'm not going to say the industry, let's say just dealerships.
Yep.
That's where they struggle the most, is that transition right there.
Absolutely. So the idea behind Contagious, and specifically the company and the brand, is that our industry has an obvious culture problem, right? That is systemic within the industry. However, not totalitarian. It doesn't cover 100% of the industry. So we're not speaking to, the top 10% of dealers, right?
Yep.
And maybe even less, maybe top 5% of dealers that don't have this overwhelming culture issue.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is you probably get another 50% that believe there's not a culture issue, right? But what I know is that the perception is similar to the guy that was on the plane last night that hasn't been to a dealership in 11 years after a poor purchase experience and is about my age.
Okay.
Because his perception based on that reality is that the culture and the dynamics of doing business with our industry is not good. And so you have to understand that the culture within our industry is not good. And that the perception follows that culture.
Yeah.
So we don't just have a PR problem, we have a culture problem. And so for us, for Paul and myself, that culture and PR problem can actually be solved within a positive marketing persona within the dealership.
For sure.
Reason being is because the marketers are typically the best communicators. And so if the marketers can get the executive leadership on board with a story-driven why-based business philosophy, meaning solid core vision, values, and mission that translate to a go-to-market strategy, both internally and externally, that actually begins to shift culture and thereby perception within the local sphere of influence. If we can do that in more dealerships,
well, changing the perception. That's a huge starting point, right?
Right.
But then it has to go into the operations of it.
Right.
I mean, I got to be honest with you. I'm sure you've done business, and I've done business with other companies. I'm totally outside of automotive.
Right.
That I had the perception going into it. I'm like, this is going to be a fun experience. Then you kind of find out it really isn't,
right?
Because it falls apart, right? So how do we take it from a marketing strategy around perception and translate it into operations?
So I would say that your marketing strategy has to start with your people first.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of people, when they think of marketing or when they hear the word marketing, they're actually, or when they say the word marketing, they are actually talking about advertising.
Yes, that's what people's brains go to.
My term for marketing is actually much deeper. And I believe that actually if you spent 90% of your time as a marketing team marketing to your people, and 10% marketing to people outside or client acquisition, your client acquisition will become a lot faster and cheaper.
I actually don't disagree with that.
So watch, what happens is the marketing team actually becomes the holder of vision and values within the store.
Yeah.
And can communicate that naturally, internally, whether that be, it goes across logos or documents or the words that you use within the company or the way that meetings are held or the way that you do culture activation, the technology that you bring in to support the staff, right?
Because a lot of times into the process.
The marketing team actually is like the ones bringing innovative technology ideas to the stores, whether it be for HR, right? I was the marketing person. Brought in the HR technology for our company to hire people better, right?
Yeah.
And so that marketing team can really be the holder of that if it's a well-rounded marketing team and not just like your ad buyer, right?
Well, see, that's why I think, I even hate calling it the marketing team because I feel, we both agree, it's evolved so much beyond marketing, and, it's more branding and operations than I would say marketing, because marketing is just for how people perceive marketing right now.
Your
it's
marketing
more the execution.
Your marketing team should have a seat at the operations table.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. You don't see that happen right now.
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of people will say, well, I have a marketing person.
Yeah.
Well, what happens is they are not well led, they're not well trained, and they're left to the side, and they become the arts and crafts corner whenever you need a new graphic, right? And whenever you decide to add something new to the website, they're told to make it work, right?
Yep.
instead of them having a seat at the operations table to where they actually help lead the conversation and the innovation within the store, to a point that when it comes to actually advertising whatever you're changing, it's a natural flow in the process.
Yes.
Right? And that's the big shift that we're trying to bring to it, and we believe that it really can shift the culture. And here's the thing, if it doesn't shift the culture and perception of our industry, retail automotive will see its end, similar to Blockbuster.
Well, 100%. I mean, it's becoming more PR. It's like we almost gonna have to find a new name for it. You know, it's not the marketing department. You know, it's like I know a lot of PR people at the OEM level, and it's like they're the ones that get like the tiniest budgets like ever. They don't ever get involved in big conversations, and it's like they're overlooked a lot, right? But that is the perception, all right. And then the marketing is just kind of how we ultimately going to execute on it. But then operations has to all be tied in. It has to be this collective thing. And I hate to say it, but you know, for the most part, I would say for the last 18, 20 years I've been in the business, it's like we have these islands.
Yep.
And at best, they're using Morse code to communicate with each other.
Oh, man, you hit a chord right there, because the way I describe it is like the marketing department and the operations or executive leadership team walk into an office and they just, one speaking Greek and one speaking German, and both their native language is English.
Yeah, might as well, man.
That's what it feels like, right? And so our goal is to kind of to change that game and get everyone speaking English together, or at least speaking the same language, and really communicating that really well, so that it feels good and it's engaging for both parties, and then it becomes really fun. And then your people, I'll tell you what happens, retention goes up.
Oh yeah,
because your people know what you're about. And it feels good to be a part of your company.
Yeah, imagine turnover goes down.
Absolutely.
Overall happiness. Well, culture becomes the byproduct.
Bingo.
You know? Well, this has been an awesome podcast, and I think that a lot of people that are watching, listening right now would probably love to continue to have this conversation with you.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, just find Contagious Auto anywhere online. I'm the only Kyle Mountsier in the world, so if you spelled it right on the podcast, you can find me. Or just email me, kyle@contagiousauto.com. I'd love to continue the conversation. I love engaging with people in our industry, on the dealer, the vendor side, any of that, and just getting more people rowing in the same direction.
Man, I love it, dude. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
This has been a blast.
Super fun.